They say revenge is never the answer, but what if it's the only way to tell the truth? Clara had everything: a marriage that looked perfect, a home filled with memories, and a husband she trusted more than anyone. Until one night, she discovered a message that changed everything. Instead of crying, she planned. Instead of confronting him, she waited. And when her husband reserved a table for his secret dinner with another woman, Clara reserved the table right next to them. But she didn't come alone. She brought the other woman's husband. What followed wasn't shouting. It wasn't chaos. It was quiet revenge, the kind that breaks more than hearts, it breaks illusions. This is not just a story about betrayal. It's a story about power, truth, and the strength of walking away with your head held high. Because sometimes, the most elegant revenge is peace. The sound of glass breaking isn't always violent. Sometimes it's soft, like a quiet truth slipping through everything you thought was solid. That's what I heard the night my marriage cracked. Not the crash of a falling vase, not a scream, not even a slammed door. Just the delicate clink of a wine glass tipping over on our dining table, a tiny, accidental sound, followed by the silence that comes when two people pretend it means nothing. "Don't worry, I'll clean it," Lucas said, already reaching for a napkin. His voice was calm, practiced. 17 years together and I could still hear every nuance, the charm he used for strangers, the warmth he saved for colleagues, the politeness that had slowly replaced love. I smiled because that's what you do when something in you starts to sink, you smile to buy time before you drown. The clock behind him glowed 8:42 p.m. He had just come home from another late client dinner. His tie was loosened, his shirt smelled faintly of perfume, not mine, and his phone buzzed on the table like an impatient heart. He didn't look at it. That's how I knew. People who have nothing to hide glance at their phones. People who do pretend it's not even there. The air between us felt staged, like we were actors running lines we'd rehearsed for years. "Long day?" I asked, voice light. He nodded, pouring himself another glass of wine. "You have no idea." He always said that, and I always let it go. Until that night. The moment he left the room to take a shower, I stared at the phone still lighting up on the counter. 3 messages in 5 seconds. No name, just a heart emoji after every text. My pulse synced with the blinking light. I didn't reach for it right away. There's a strange courtesy between suspicion and proof, the last fragile seconds when you still want to be wrong. Then another message appeared: "Can't wait for Friday." I got the red dress. Window seat, right? Window seat. I didn't need to see more. The phone buzzed again, vibrating against the marble like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. He had changed the lock screen photo months ago, said he wanted something cleaner. Now it was just black glass reflecting my face back at me. I almost laughed. It was the most honest mirror I'd seen in years. A room filled with ghosts. Our house was beautiful, the kind that made other people whisper, "They've got it all figured out." Oak floors, framed vacations, matching mugs labeled his and hers. But that night, every object felt haunted. The photo of us at the Grand Canyon? Just pixels. The clock that used to tick in rhythm with our laughter? A metronome counting the seconds until I moved. I sat at the edge of the dining chair and stared at the glass he'd broken. One tiny shard caught the light like a star. That was the moment I realized, the only way to survive a shattering is to make sure you're the one who chooses where the pieces fall. The silence before the storm. When Lucas came back, his hair damp and his phone in his hand, he was humming softly. The melody was unfamiliar, probably something she liked. He didn't notice the way I watched him, didn't notice how I memorized every gesture. He sat across from me, scrolled for a second, and smiled at his screen before looking up. "You okay?" he asked, almost gently. I wanted to say no, but thank you for asking after 17 years. Instead I said, "Yeah, just tired." He believed me. That was his first mistake. That night, while he slept, I lay awake listening to the rhythm of his breathing, even, calm, undeservedly peaceful. I wanted to wake him, to ask who is she? But questions are mercy when you already know the answer. Instead, I whispered something into the darkness, something I hadn't said aloud in years: "I deserve better than this." The words hung there, foreign but real. I repeated them until they sounded like a promise. 3 days the next morning I requested 3 days off from the university. No reason given, just personal leave. People assume grief is messy, loud, dramatic. They don't understand the discipline it takes to break quietly. I spent the first day watching patterns, his calendar, his emails, his calls. 17 years of marriage gives you all the passwords you'll ever need. By sunset, I knew the truth in detail: her name, her job, her tone of texting. Sophie, junior communications manager at his firm. Blonde. 29. I found a photo of her on the company's website, smiling like the world owed her sunlight. I stared at it for a long time, not with hate, but with something colder: study. If this was a story, she wasn't the villain. Lucas wasn't the hero. I wasn't the victim. We were just 3 people standing at the edge of consequences. The idea I didn't want to scream. I wanted precision. Something quiet, elegant, and final, like closing a book mid-sentence because you already know the ending. Scrolling through her page, I saw a photo: her wedding. She was married too. His name was Ethan Walker, an architect. Kind eyes. Confident smile. The caption read, "To forever." Funny how people still write that word. I didn't cry. Instead, I felt a calm bloom under my ribs, the kind that comes when a plan begins to take shape. If Lucas wanted candlelight, he could have it. If Sophie wanted romance, she could keep it. But they'd both have to dine with truth. Preparation day 2 was logistics. Emails, phone calls, little details. I crafted a message to Ethan, a formal, professional, perfectly polite. Dear Mr. Walker, my name is Clara Hamilton. I teach project management at Metro Denver University. We're hosting a series on urban architecture and I came across your recent work. Would you be available to discuss a potential guest lecture? Perhaps over dinner Friday evening? It took exactly 13 minutes for him to reply, "I'd be honored." Just like that, the pieces aligned. Next, the call to Lumiere, the restaurant. The hostess's voice was soft, friendly. I asked for a table near the window, and, casually, if possible, near the reservation for Hamilton and Rothman. We're potential collaborators, I said lightly. She noted it down without a flicker of suspicion. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Day 3 was silence. I said nothing to Lucas, cooked dinner as usual, listened to him talk about work while hiding the tremor in his voice when a text buzzed in his pocket. By midnight, I had packed a small clutch: keys, lipstick, phone, composure. Nothing more. Everything else, the years, the history, the lies, could stay behind. The night before I stood in front of the mirror that evening and looked at the woman staring back. Not the lecturer, not the wife, not the steady figure in Christmas photos. Just a woman who had decided to stop being silent. The teal dress still fit, the one Lucas once said was too much for dinner. Good. I wanted too much. I wanted every man and woman in that restaurant to see me and remember what happens when the quiet ones decide they're done pretending. Outside, the city pulsed with life, car horns, laughter, music. Inside, everything was still. I picked up the broken wine glass from the night before and set it gently into the trash. Some endings don't need noise. They just need closure. The drive Friday evening. 7:10 p.m. Denver glowed under rain-polished streets. Traffic lights blinked like tiny warnings. I drove past our house one last time, the windows lit, the life I'd built quietly waiting to be dismantled. Every second brought me closer to Lumiere, to the moment the masks would fall. I wasn't nervous. Nerves belong to people who still hope for an outcome. I had already decided the ending. All that remained was the reveal. As I parked outside the restaurant, a single drop of rain landed on the windshield and slid down like a tear someone else had been holding back. Inside the building, light spilled through tall glass panels, warm, inviting, deceitful. I checked my reflection one last time. Hair pinned, lips steady, eyes clear. "Showtime," I whispered. And for the first time in years, I felt something dangerously close to freedom. The rain hadn't stopped since morning. It was the kind that didn't fall, it whispered, like someone pacing outside a window. By the time I reached Lumiere, the streets were slick with silver, and my reflection followed me up the glass doors like a ghost that finally decided to show its face. Inside, the air was warm, gold-tinted, alive with the murmur of dinner plates and laughter, all those little sounds of people believing their world was intact. I walked in quietly, because truth doesn't always announce itself, sometimes it just takes a seat and waits. The hostess smiled. "Reservation for two?" "Yes," I said. "Hamilton." She glanced at her screen, then her eyes lifted with professional ease. "Window seat. Right next to the Rothman table. Perfect view." Perfect, indeed. I let her lead me to the table, a delicate distance away from where the betrayal would breathe. My chest felt steady, like standing at the edge of a cliff you've already decided to jump from. The fear's still there, but you're past the point of backing out. The man who didn't know he arrived 3 minutes early. Ethan Walker. He walked like someone used to being noticed but too polite to assume he should be. Dark coat, neat collar, and the kind of posture that said honesty before words even had to. He didn't recognize me, of course. To him, I was just a professor, a stranger with an invitation. "Mrs. Hamilton," he greeted, shaking my hand. His grip was warm, firm, unguarded. "Clara," I corrected. "Thank you for meeting me." He smiled faintly. "My pleasure. It's not often I get to talk about design outside of boardrooms." We sat. I let him talk about architecture, about balance and symmetry, the language of people who believe structures can hold forever. He spoke with conviction, tracing invisible lines on the tablecloth as if sketching foundations midair. Funny, I thought, how both our worlds were about building things meant to last, and how fragile they turned out to be. The perfect strangers. There's a quiet intimacy in listening to someone who doesn't know they're walking toward an earthquake. I watched his eyes, a blue, kind, steady, and wondered if Sophie had ever looked into them before lying. He was describing a project near the river when the door opened. My spine reacted before my mind did. Lucas. He looked the same as always, expensive blazer, casual arrogance, the faint scent of expensive cologne I'd once loved. But now it felt intrusive, like a stranger wearing my husband's skin. And beside him, Sophie. Red dress. Hair curled. Smile rehearsed. They walked in laughing, and for a moment the restaurant seemed to tilt, the warmth, the chatter, everything bending around that simple sight. I didn't turn my head. I didn't have to. Their reflection was in the glass window beside me, perfect view. Pretense and precision. Ethan followed my line of sight briefly. "Beautiful night," he said, looking out the same window. "Yes," I said softly, "beautiful." Inside, my heart was threading a needle, one bead at a time, too carefully to break. Lucas helped Sophie out of her coat, his hand brushing the back of her neck like muscle memory. I remembered when that same hand used to fix my scarf before class, how he'd call me his calm before chaos. Now he was chaos, he just didn't know the calm sitting right next to him yet. I raised my glass to my lips, smiled, and asked Ethan, "Do you believe design can fix what's broken?" He paused. "No," he said after a moment. "It can only reveal where the cracks always were." The words landed like prophecy. I nodded. "That's what I think too." Anatomy of betrayal. Lucas poured wine for Sophie, leaned in close, whispered something that made her laugh into her napkin. Every detail was deliberate, the way he tilted his head, the way she played with her hair. I knew that choreography, I'd written it once upon a time. It's strange, watching your past performed by strangers, the same gestures, just different names in the script. For a second, I almost pitied them. Almost. But pity is for the innocent. My pulse steadied into rhythm with the background violin. Every note felt rehearsed, every motion part of the ritual. Then, as if fate was a playwright, Lucas turned his head, maybe to stretch, maybe just by instinct, and saw me. Our eyes met. Time didn't stop, it simply narrowed. For half a heartbeat, his face froze, that moment when memory collides with mistake. Then he smiled, but it wasn't real, it was defense, panic wrapped in charm. I held his gaze, lifted my wineglass slightly, and mouthed one word, "Cheers." His fingers trembled around the stem of his glass. Sophie noticed. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. Nothing, he lied. The word hung between them like smoke. Tension tightens. Ethan looked puzzled. Do you know them? I tilted my head, meeting his curious gaze. Not yet, I said. He smiled, unaware of the weight behind my words. We continued talking, but I could feel the air thickening. Lucas kept glancing over, once, twice, a third time. His eyes begged for control of a situation he didn't understand. Sophie followed his gaze eventually. Her expression faltered. She knew who I was, maybe from photos, maybe from the way Lucas went still when he saw me. Her fork clinked against the plate. She whispered something. Lucas shook his head, jaw tightening. From where I sat, the scene looked almost beautiful, two people losing balance in slow motion while pretending everything was fine. I turned back to Ethan. Tell me, I said, do you ever design for destruction? He laughed lightly. Sometimes. Old buildings need to collapse before new ones can stand. My smile didn't reach my eyes. That's exactly what I believe. The invitation, it wasn't enough to expose them silently. Silence can be mistaken for coincidence. Truth deserves witnesses. Ethan, I said softly, would you excuse me for a moment? I need to check on something. Of course. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked past tables of laughter and clinking silverware. Each step felt measured, deliberate. Not vengeance, choreography. When I reached Sophie's table, I placed a hand lightly on the back of a chair. Evening, I said. Her face went pale. Lucas opened his mouth but no sound came. I looked at Sophie, then at him. Small world, I said. I didn't realize we'd all end up here tonight. Her fingers gripped her wine glass. Lucas's throat worked hard, swallowing words that wouldn't help him. I'm sorry, do we? Sophie began. Yes, I interrupted. We do. Lucas whispered my name, not lovingly, not even pleadingly, just as a man cornered by truth. I leaned closer, my voice calm. You might want to introduce me to your guest. It's only polite, considering her husband's sitting just over there. Color drained from both their faces. The restaurant's hum seemed to vanish, even the violinist hesitated mid-note. I straightened, turned toward our table, and called softly, Ethan? Would you join us for a moment? He stood, confused but obliging, and walked over, until he saw her. Sophie. Recognition hit like wind through a door left open too long. He stopped cold. Sophie's breath hitched. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was alive, humming with shock. The fracture point. Lucas stood, hands trembling. Clara, let's what? I said evenly. Pretend? Ethan's eyes darted between the three of us, landing on Sophie. Tell me this isn't real, he said quietly. She opened her mouth, but only a broken sound came out. It didn't matter. Truth doesn't need confession, it only needs light. I looked at them both. Don't worry, I'll leave you to your dinner. You've earned it. Then, after a pause, I added, it's on Lucas's card, of course. And with that, I turned, walked past the frozen faces, and returned to my table where Ethan still stood, shoulders rigid, eyes stunned open. I didn't touch him. I didn't say sorry. I just said, now you know. He nodded slowly, face paling. I didn't believe people could lie like that. Neither did I said. Until they did. Exit wounds. We walked out together into the rain, neither of us speaking. Cars passed, their headlights washing the pavement in streaks of gold and white. He finally asked, how long have you known? Long enough to plan dinner, I said quietly. He laughed once, not from humor, but disbelief. You're calm. I spent 17 years rehearsing silence, I replied. I guess I just perfected it. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, you didn't deserve that. Neither did you. The rain softened to mist. The city hummed around us, indifferent, alive, infinite. Somewhere behind us, two people were choking on truth. Ahead of us, there was only the uncertain, quiet road of aftermath. Ethan exhaled slowly. What happens now? I looked at the blurred skyline and said, now, we start designing something new from the ruins. And for the first time that night, the rain didn't feel cold. The city was still awake. Rain turned to mist, mist to silence, silence to the strange emptiness that follows an ending you've seen coming but still hoped to outrun. Ethan and I stood under the glowing awning of lumiere like two survivors dragged out of the same wreck, dazed, breathing, unsure which way was home. Behind us, the restaurant glimmered with candlelight and confusion. I could still see them, Lucas and Sophie, through the blurred glass. Two silhouettes, motionless. The play had ended, but they hadn't yet realized the audience had left. I adjusted my clutch, took a breath that felt heavier than air. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Ethan shook his head. Don't apologize. You didn't do this. He was right, but I had still lit the match. A hotel across the street. I can't drive like this, he said after a long pause. His voice cracked, not from tears, but exhaustion. Neither can I admitted. We crossed the street to the Celeste Hotel, a tall, modern building wrapped in soft light, the kind of place built for business travelers and broken hearts. At the front desk, I said, 2 rooms. The clerk nodded, polite, unassuming, unaware that the quiet people before him had just dismantled 2 lives over dinner. When the elevator doors closed, the silence between us grew thick. Ethan leaned against the mirrored wall, running a hand through his hair. You planned this perfectly, he said, not as praise, as disbelief. I had to, I replied. Otherwise, he would have made me the villain for finding out. The elevator chimed at the 12th floor. Our rooms were side by side. I fumbled with the keycard. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from release. The kind that comes when the adrenaline runs out and reality starts to settle in. The unexpected visitor. I had just slipped off my heels when the knock came. 3 soft taps. For a moment, I thought it was Lucas. My pulse spiked, throat dry. But when I opened the door, it was Ethan. He stood there, drenched from the rain, still wearing that look, the one people have when they realize their life is no longer the story they thought it was. I couldn't sleep, he said. Everything's spinning. I stepped aside. Come in. He sat on the armchair, elbows on knees, staring at the carpet. I keep replaying it, he said. Her face. That silence. It's like I'm watching a stranger use her voice. I nodded. I know the feeling. He looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time since the restaurant. You didn't even yell. You just exposed them. I spent 17 years learning how to stay calm, I said. Turns out it's useful when you finally need to burn something down. He gave a short, broken laugh. You're stronger than you look. No, I said quietly. I'm just tired of pretending I'm weak. The midnight confession. We talked for hours, not the kind of conversation that fills silence, but the kind that builds bridges over it. He told me about their marriage, the long nights she spent scrolling on her phone, the growing distance, the sudden new perfume she never wore before. I told him about Lucas's absences, the careful lies disguised as routine. It was like comparing blueprints of the same collapsing house. When he finally stopped talking, he looked out the window. Do you think they'll regret it? No, I said honestly. Not at first. People like that don't regret the lie. They regret getting caught. He nodded slowly. I used to believe in forgiveness. Me too, I said. But I think forgiveness without accountability is just permission. He turned toward me then, studying my face as if searching for proof that I believed my own words. I did. But belief doesn't always soothe the hurt. The knock on the door came around 2 a.m. A sharp, frantic knocking. I froze. Ethan stood, instantly alert. Another knock, harder. Clara. Please, open the door. Lucas. His voice carried that familiar tone, desperate, urgent, threaded with the same manipulation that once used to sound like love. Ethan looked at me. You don't have to, I know. I opened the door. Lucas stood there, soaked from the rain, tie gone, eyes red. We need to talk. No, you need to explain, I said calmly. Talking implies a conversation. He stepped forward, but Ethan rose behind me, tall, composed, silent. Lucas stopped. His expression shifted, from pleading to shame to something brittle and jealous. Of course. He could betray me, but couldn't stand seeing another man in my room. I made a mistake, he said. It didn't mean anything. I laughed softly. 17 years, Lucas. You should know I don't believe in meaningless mistakes. Please, Clara. I'll end it with her. I already did. Not because you wanted to, I said. Because you got caught. His mouth opened, but no defense came. The rain behind him blurred the hall lights into streaks of gold. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Go home, I said. There's nothing left here for you. His eyes darted between me and Ethan. Is this what you wanted? To humiliate me? No, I said. I wanted the truth. The humiliation came free. He flinched. For a second, I thought he might yell, but instead, he just nodded once, broken, and walked away down the hall. The door closed softly behind him. The shift Ethan sat back down, rubbing his face with both hands. He really came here. Of course he did, I said. Men like him only fight for things once they've lost control of them. The clock on the nightstand blinked 2:36 a.m. The city outside was quiet, no sirens, no noise, just the dull hum of distant rain. We sat there for a long time without talking. Then Ethan said something that surprised me. Clara, do you ever think we both deserved to know sooner? I turned that over in my head. Maybe. But if we'd known earlier, we'd have forgiven them. That's what people like us do, we make excuses for others to avoid confronting ourselves. He stared at me like he was seeing me clearly for the first time. Maybe that's why it took both of us to end it, he said. You lit the fire, and I walked through it. Then we're even, I said softly. A moment of stillness, the conversation slowed. The adrenaline faded. The room felt heavier, not with tension, but with understanding. Ethan stood to leave. I'll go, he said. You should rest. He reached for the door handle, then stopped. Clara, can I ask something? Go ahead. When you saw his messages, what did it feel like? The first second. I thought about it. Like drowning in air. Everything looks the same, but nothing feels real anymore. He nodded. Yeah. That's exactly it. He opened the door halfway, then hesitated again. You know what's strange? For the first time tonight, I don't feel angry. Just empty. Give it time, I said. The emptiness will turn into space. He looked at me, really looked, not like a man looking at a woman, but like someone seeing a survivor and realizing he's one too. Good night, Clara. Good night, Ethan. The door closed quietly. The real twist: I didn't sleep. Not because of Lucas, he was gone. But because I couldn't stop thinking about the strange calm inside me. For 17 years, I had lived on emotional autopilot, managing, smoothing, adjusting. And tonight, after the worst thing that could have happened, I felt more alive than I had in years. That terrified me. Because maybe this wasn't just about betrayal. Maybe it was about freedom and the guilt that comes with it. I walked to the window, pressed my palm to the glass, and watched the city lights blur like constellations underwater. My phone buzzed. A message. From an unknown number, she left. I don't know where to go. Sophie. I stared at it, heart steady. For a long time, I considered deleting it. Then I typed back, find yourself. That's the only place left to go. I hit send, locked the screen, and finally allowed the tears I'd been saving for 17 years to fall, not for him, not for them, but for the version of me who stayed too long, who mistook endurance for love. The woman in the window's reflection looked different now. Not broken. Not bitter. Just becoming. And somewhere down the hall, I knew Ethan couldn't sleep either. Two strangers, one night, both standing on the edge of something new, not love, not yet, but the faint beginning of hope. Morning light has a cruel honesty. It doesn't hide what the night lets you forget. 3 days had passed since the dinner at Lumiere. 3 days since I'd watched my husband's face crumble like paper under the weight of his own secrets. And yet, the house still smelled like him, cologne, cedarwood, and lies. I stood in the doorway, holding a box of his things, cufflinks, watches, the tie I'd given him for his promotion, a half-read novel he'd never finish. It was amazing, really, how much of a man could fit into a single box once love stopped expanding around him. The front door creaked open. Lucas stepped in. He looked smaller, the kind of small that happens when pride finally deflates. His eyes searched the living room like a battlefield. "Clara," he said quietly, "thank you for letting me come." "I didn't," I replied. "You just walked in." He gave a half-smile, the one that used to soften arguments, the one I used to fall for. It didn't work anymore. The confrontation. He looked tired, dark circles, wrinkled shirt, a man halfway between guilt and delusion. "I haven't slept," he admitted. "I can't stop thinking about you. About that night." I folded my arms. "That night was you thinking about someone else, remember?" He flinched. "You've every right to hate me, but I need you to understand, Sophie meant nothing." I let out a laugh, short and bitter. "People don't ruin 17 years for nothing, Lucas." He stepped closer. "I was lost. I made a mistake." "Mistakes happen once," I said. "What you did was repetition. That's a choice." For a long moment, he didn't speak. The silence between us was thicker than any argument. Then he whispered, "I can't lose you." "You already did." His hands trembled. "I'll do therapy, I'll quit my job, I'll stop." The word came sharper than I intended. He froze. "You want to fix it because you hate the consequences, not because you understand the damage," I said. "You're not mourning me, Lucas. You're mourning your image of being a good husband." He dropped his gaze to the floor. "Is there really no way back?" "No," I said softly. "Because you burned the bridge while I was still standing on it." The unexpected turn. He exhaled, shaking his head. "Do you know Sophie quit? She left the city." "I know. She told HR she couldn't face the whispers. Everyone knows now, the firm, our friends. I'm ruined." There it was, the truth he'd been holding back. "Not I hurt you, but I'm ruined." "You're not ruined," I said. "You're just seen." "That's not the same thing." His expression twisted. "You told them, didn't you?" "I told the truth," I said evenly. "If you didn't want people to know, you shouldn't have done it." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "Do you realize what you've done to me?" "Yes," I said. "I've stopped protecting you." The words landed like glass shattering. He stared at me, stunned. "You were supposed to be my safe place." I met his eyes. "I was your shelter, not your shield." "There's a difference." He stood there for a long time, breathing unevenly, searching for the version of me that used to forgive. But she was gone. Internal collapse. When he finally spoke again, his voice cracked. "I don't know who I am without you." "That's the problem," I whispered. "You were never supposed to find yourself in me." For a second, he looked so lost I almost pitied him. Almost. Then I remembered the nights he'd texted her while I was asleep beside him, the mornings he'd kissed my forehead and called it love while carrying someone else in his pocket. I wasn't cruel. I was finished. He sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees, eyes glistening. "I thought I'd be happier," he murmured. "Isn't that pathetic?" "Yes," I said. "Because happiness that depends on deceit never lasts." He nodded slowly, tears threatening. "I ruined everything." "No, Lucas," I said, voice steady. "You revealed everything." The doorway decision. When he finally stood, he looked at the box of his things, then at me. "What happens now?" "I file for divorce." "You rebuild your life." "Separately." He swallowed hard. "Is that it?" "That's everything," I said. He hesitated in the doorway, wanting to say more, but silence was kinder than begging. He finally whispered, "I hope one day you forgive me." I looked at him, the man I'd built my youth around, the man who taught me patience and betrayal in equal measure. "I already did," I said. Just not in the way you hoped. He frowned. What does that mean? It means forgiveness doesn't mean coming back. It means letting go without carrying the weight. For a second, he just stood there absorbing it. Then he nodded, the smallest, most broken nod, and left. The door clicked shut. And the silence that followed didn't hurt. It healed. The aftermath, I sank to the floor, back against the wall. It was over. 17 years, reduced to a single closed door and the echo of footsteps leaving for good. But endings aren't quiet, they just move the noise inside you. I felt it all, the grief, relief, fury, peace, colliding until none of it made sense. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number again. Ethan, are you okay? I stared at the words. Simple, human, genuine. I typed back, yes. Finally. A pause, then another message, good. I was worried you'd forgive him too soon. I smiled faintly. Not this time. He replied, coffee tomorrow? For the first time in weeks, I didn't hesitate. Yes. The quiet connection the next morning, the air felt lighter. I met Ethan at a small cafe tucked behind the old library, the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and conversation. He was already there, sitting by the window, 2 mugs waiting. When I walked in, he stood, small gesture, old-fashioned, kind. Good morning, he said. Morning, I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. He studied my face. You look different. Probably because I'm not pretending anymore. He smiled, and something eased in the space between us, not romance, not yet, just understanding. We talked, not about them, but about us. About what comes after the world stops spinning. He told me he'd filed for divorce too, that Sophie had left him a note, nothing more. I told him Lucas came by last night, still trying to rewrite the ending. Ethan nodded. They always do. People who lie want a second chance at the truth. Except the truth doesn't change, I said. No, he agreed. But people do. Building the new. By the time we finished coffee, sunlight had filled the cafe, cutting clean lines across the table. It felt like a small, accidental blessing, light where darkness had lived too long. As we stood to leave, Ethan hesitated. Can I ask something? Of course. When you planned that night, the dinner, did you ever think about what would happen afterward? I thought for a moment. No. I only planned the reveal. I never planned the recovery. He smiled softly. Then maybe this is the recovery. I didn't answer. Because recovery isn't a moment, it's a slow rebuild of something you thought would never stand again. He walked me to my car, and as we said goodbye, he said, you don't owe anyone an apology for surviving. That line stayed with me. The letter that evening, I found an envelope slid under my door. Lucas's handwriting. Inside, a single sheet of paper. No apologies, no explanations. Just one sentence, you were right, love can't survive in the shadows. I folded the paper carefully, placed it inside the box of his old things, and sealed it shut. Then I took the box to the curb, set it down beside the trash bins, and walked away before the truck arrived. Some things don't need closure. They just need distance. The build-to climax. As I returned inside, the quiet hit differently. It wasn't empty anymore. It was open. I looked around, the half-empty shelves, the quiet kitchen, the echoing hallway, and realized this was the first time in 17 years the house belonged to me. I walked to the window, pulled the curtains wide, and let the late sunlight flood in. My phone buzzed. Ethan again. Ethan, do you believe people can start over? Me, yes, but not from scratch. From the truth. He sent a single message back, then maybe we already have. I stared at the text for a long time, the kind of long that feels like standing at the edge of something, not an ending, not quite a beginning, but the moment before both. The same feeling I'd had before the storm. Only this time, it wasn't fear. It was peace, the quiet that comes before a new story begins. And somewhere deep down, I realized the real climax wasn't revenge or confrontation. It was reclaiming myself, the version of me who finally stopped surviving and started living. The world looked ordinary again, cruelly, perfectly ordinary. Weeks had passed since Lucas left. And yet, every morning, I still woke up expecting the sound of his keys, his coffee cup, his footsteps down the hall. Memory has no mercy. It doesn't fade when people leave, it lingers, asking for one last audience. I had imagined this part, the after, to feel lighter. It didn't. It felt suspended. Some nights, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if peace always came with this much silence. It was a Thursday when the phone rang. Unknown number. Clara Hamilton, a voice said. Yes. This is Dr. Patel. Your husband, Lucas, was brought in about an hour ago. There's been an accident. The world stopped. Sound became a memory. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember the drive, red lights blurring into each other, city noise dissolving into the single, endless thought pulsing in my head, don't die before I finish forgiving you. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and aftermath. A nurse led me through white corridors until we reached room 314. Lucas was there, pale, still, machines breathing for him. A bandage across his forehead, tubes running like tangled confessions. I stood at the doorway, frozen. All the things I'd ever wanted to say, every accusation, every wound, turned into something quieter. Not pity. Not love. Just recognition. I moved closer, fingers trembling as I brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. He stirred slightly, eyes flickering open. Clara, his voice was a rasp, thin as paper. I'm here, I said. He blinked, eyes unfocused. I didn't mean to call you. I know. He swallowed. Sophie, she's gone. She left me. I was drinking, stop, I said softly. You don't have to explain anymore. Tears welled in his eyes. You were always the better one. I shook my head. No, Lucas. I was just the one who stayed longer. The truth unspoken, he tried to smile, but pain caught his breath. I thought about you, he whispered. Every day since, I placed a hand over his. Rest. You don't need to say it. But he did. Because people only tell the truth when there's no time left to hide behind it. I loved you, he said. I just didn't know how. 1,000 versions of me wanted to scream. Another version wanted to hold him. Instead, I said, then I hope the next life teaches you. His eyes fluttered. The monitor beeped slower, steadier, then leveled into silence. For a moment, the room felt like the end of a prayer, quiet, suspended between goodbye and peace. I stood there, unable to cry. Grief didn't come as tears. It came as stillness. Because how do you mourn someone who already left you once? The release outside, rain began to fall again. I sat on the cold bench beneath the hospital awning, letting the air sting my face. Ethan found me there. I didn't ask how he knew, some people just show up when words stop working. He sat beside me, no umbrella, no questions. Just presence. After a while, he said, you don't have to pretend you're fine. I'm not, I admitted. But I'm done. He nodded. That's the hardest part, not the loss, but the release. We sat in silence, watching raindrops slide down the railing like tiny goodbyes. Do you believe in second chances? I asked. He looked at me. Only when people don't waste the first one. A sad smile touched my lips. Then I guess this is just a new start. The letter he left a week later, I went through Lucas's things. The hospital returned, wallet, watch, and one folded note sealed in a plastic bag. The handwriting was uneven, rushed. Clara, if you ever read this, I want you to know, I see it now. You didn't destroy me. You revealed me. You were the only honest thing I ever had. I'm sorry it took losing you to understand love. L. I sat there for a long time, the note trembling in my hands. It wasn't closure. It was confirmation. I had done everything I could, and that had to be enough. I burned the letter in the fireplace that night. Not out of anger. Out of completion. The flame curled around the paper, eating the words, turning them into smoke, fragments of a man who once tried to build his happiness out of deception. The final visit weeks later, I visited the spot where Lucas was buried, a quiet patch of earth under a sycamore tree. The wind carried the faint scent of rain and grass. I didn't bring flowers. I brought the small brass compass he once gave me for our anniversary, engraved with "Find Your Way Back." I placed it on the ground and whispered, "You finally did." The wind shifted, carrying my hair across my face. Somewhere in that sound, I felt forgiveness take shape, not as words, but as weight leaving. I turned to leave, but Ethan was there, standing by the path, hands in pockets, watching me with the kind of quiet that doesn't intrude. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "For the first time, I think I really am." The skyline we walked together through the park. The city skyline rose in the distance, glass, steel, light. "Funny," I said, "how everything keeps moving after your world ends." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe that's mercy." We reached the bridge, the same one overlooking the river that split the city in two, and I realized that was exactly what I had done, split my life in two halves, before truth and after truth. He leaned on the railing beside me. "You ever think about starting over somewhere else?" "No," I said. "I think about starting over here, where I finally stopped lying to myself." He looked at me, then said softly, "You're not the same woman from that restaurant." "No," I agreed. She died the moment she raised that glass. The revelation silence hung between us, comfortable now, not emptiness, but calm. Then Ethan said something that pierced deeper than he knew. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think sometimes revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about forcing them, and yourself, to finally see." I looked at him, eyes glinting in the city lights. "Then I guess we both saw." He smiled. "Yeah. We did." We stood there for a long time, the wind tugging at our coats, the river whispering below. No promises. No plans. Just two people who had crawled out of the same fire and learned how to breathe again. The climax, rebirth. When I got home, I opened the windows wide and let the evening air in. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt reclaimed. I walked through each room, not to remember, but to replace. In the living room, I painted over the wall where our wedding photo once hung. In the kitchen, I changed the plates we used to eat from together. And in the bedroom, I replaced his side of the bed with a desk, my writing desk. On it, a blank notebook. The first page read, "Blueprints for a New Life." I wrote the first line beneath it, "Healing is not rebuilding what was lost. It's designing what was never allowed to exist." The words came easily, like they'd been waiting for years. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, light poured across the page, gold, soft, endless. I whispered to the empty room, "I'm free." And this time, the silence answered back, "I know." It's strange how silence becomes a language of its own. In the beginning, it was heavy, the silence of betrayal, of things unsaid, of ghosts moving through rooms that no longer held meaning. But now, months later, that silence has softened. It feels like breath. Like space. Like peace. The house is different. I sold the heavy furniture. Repainted the walls in pale ivory. Opened the windows every morning so sunlight could wash out whatever shadows were left. It's still the same address, but it's no longer a graveyard of what used to be. It's mine now, truly mine. The new blueprint I've kept writing. The notebook on my desk, the one titled "Blueprints for a New Life," is almost full now. Each page is a map of small recoveries, the first time I laughed without guilt. The day I realized I could eat alone and not feel lonely. The morning I looked in the mirror and didn't see a ghost staring back. Sometimes I write about Ethan. Not as a love story, not yet, but as a mirror. Because that's what we became to each other, two people who reflected pain until it turned into understanding. He visits sometimes, unannounced, unhurried. We sit on the porch, coffee in hand, talking about everything and nothing. There's comfort in that simplicity, no plans, no promises, just two quiet souls learning how to exist again. The letter to myself last night, I found something I hadn't seen in years, a letter I'd written to myself on my 30th birthday, hidden inside a book I'd forgotten I owned. Dear Clara, if you ever feel like your life is slipping away, remember, you were never meant to be someone's shadow. You were built for sunlight. I read it 3 times before closing my eyes. The woman who wrote that had been hopeful, naive, still waiting for permission to bloom. The woman reading it now didn't need permission anymore. I burned that letter too, not out of pain, but to mark the transition. Ashes don't always mean destruction, sometimes they're the soil things grow from. The rain returns. It rained again today. The same soft drizzle as the night. Everything changed. Except this time, I didn't flinch. I walked outside barefoot, let the water touch my skin, and laughed, really laughed, at the absurdity of it all. How something that once symbolized ruin could now feel like rebirth. Across the street, Ethan's door opened. He saw me, smiled faintly, and stepped into the rain too. We didn't speak, we didn't need to. Some silences are shared, not filled. For a few minutes, we just stood there, 2 people washed clean by the same storm. Then he said, "You finally like the rain?" And I said, "No." I finally stopped fearing it. The gallery. A month later, my first photography exhibit opened downtown, Reflections of the Ordinary. A collection of simple images, cracked windows, empty teacups, footprints in the sand, a single chair by an open window. People walked through slowly, whispering, pointing. But one photo made them stop. It was titled Table for Two. A shot of an empty restaurant table by a rain-fogged window, 2 glasses of wine untouched, a single chair pulled back as if someone had just left. No one knew it was that table. The one where everything began to end. Ethan came that evening, quietly. He stood in front of that photo for a long time, then turned to me and said, "You turned pain into art." I smiled. Pain was temporary. Art is permanent. The confession. After the exhibit, we walked to the riverside. The city lights shimmered on the water like melted stars. Ethan said, "You know, the first night we met, I thought revenge would save me." I looked at him. "And did it?" He shook his head. "No. You did, by not letting it consume you." I paused, considering that. "I didn't save you, Ethan. I just refused to sink." He laughed softly. "Maybe that's the same thing." The wind blew colder then, the kind of chill that whispers change is coming. He turned to face me. "Do you ever miss him?" I thought about it carefully. "I miss who I thought he was," I said. "But I don't miss the person who made me forget myself." He nodded. That's the difference between loss and liberation. The final choice. As we stood there, the city moving quietly around us, I realized something. I didn't need a new love story to complete me. I already had one, the story of me learning how to belong to myself. Still, when Ethan reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. Not because I needed saving, but because I was finally free enough to choose connection, not as a lifeline, but as a companion. We stood there, hand in hand, watching the reflection of lights ripple across the water. And for once, the future didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like a promise. 6 months later, the world kept moving. The divorce finalized quietly, without spectacle. Lucas's firm replaced him. Sophie reportedly left the country. The whispers stopped. And in their absence, peace grew roots. Ethan opened his own design studio, Reform. I loved the name. It meant both rebuilding and redemption. He asked me to design the gallery space for his opening. When I walked in on launch day, I saw the motto he'd carved into the entrance beam, "We build from the broken." He caught my eye across the crowd and smiled. No words. Just understanding. Because sometimes, life gives you back what loss took away, not the same thing, but something truer. The letter that ends it all. That night, I came home to another envelope on my doorstep. No name, just my address in familiar handwriting, Lucas's brother, maybe. Inside was a single photo, Lucas and I, years ago, on our honeymoon, standing on a bridge with the ocean behind us. On the back, a line written in Lucas's handwriting, "Thank you for teaching me that love is a choice, not ownership." I held the photo for a moment, then placed it inside my notebook. Between the first and last page, a chapter finally closed. The ending, the lighthouse. It was late. I drove out to the old lighthouse on the edge of the city, the place I used to photograph before life got too busy. The air smelled of salt and renewal. Standing at the edge, I could see the beam of light sweeping over the dark water, again and again, relentless, patient. A reminder that light doesn't chase darkness, it simply exists, until the darkness fades. I pulled out my notebook one last time and wrote, "Some stories don't end. They dissolve into silence, and from that silence, new beginnings rise." Then I closed it, placed it on the rocks, and let the wind turn the pages until it stopped on the blank one, a new start. Behind me, footsteps approached Ethan's. He didn't speak, just stood beside me, both of us looking out at the vast horizon. Finally, I said, "Do you know what I realized?" He turned slightly. "What?" "That I don't want to be the woman who survived." He frowned gently. "Then who do you want to be?" "The woman who lived." He smiled, small, genuine, infinite. And together, we watched the first light of dawn break over the water, gold on silver, hope on ruin. The sea roared quietly below, endless and forgiving. And that's where it ended, not in vengeance, not in sorrow, but in light. Sometimes life doesn't break you to punish you, it breaks you to wake you up. Clara's story reminds us that betrayal isn't the end of your worth, it's the beginning of your truth. She didn't seek revenge to destroy him. She sought truth to rebuild herself. Because the greatest revenge isn't shouting, crying, or hurting back, it's silence, strength, and self-respect. Forgiveness doesn't mean going back. Forgiveness means walking away without hate in your heart. At the end, Clara learned that peace is not something you beg for, it's something you create when you finally choose yourself. Sparkles, the strongest people are not those who never get broken, but those who build something beautiful from their broken pieces.